Hey everyone, we're so glad that you've joined us for church today. My name is John and I'm the new online campus pastor here at Hope City. My role is to help you connect with Jesus, with others at Hope City, and with us. And a great and easy way to start is at hopecity.ca/online. There you can find out what your next steps could look like. We also have a great team of online hosts that would love to connect with you, pray with you, and help answer any questions that you might have. If you're watching online and have a chat option in front of you, we would encourage you to simply reach out and chat there, and one of our hosts would love to connect with you. Here's what to expect over the next hour. Pastor Bernie and her band will be leading us in some songs that help us understand who God is and express our love and affection towards Him. Then afterwards, we'll be taking some time to let you know what's happening here at Hope City. You can also go to hopecity.ca/weekly at any point to keep up to date. At Hope City, we go to the Bible because we believe it's the lasting and true Word of God, and it's something that has the power to transform lives. So in a few minutes, we're going to hear from Pastor Thomas, our youth department lead, who will be sharing the next part of our series, More Than Fairy Tales, a series of talks looking at the Old Testament events and how they apply to us today. I'm so thankful that we can seek God together this morning. Enjoy the service.
It's so great to have this time together. We picked some songs that help us just think about who God is. We invite you to join in with us. Life and eternal spark, I call you healer. You can mend any broken heart, I call you faithful Father. You finish everything you start, my soul was made to respond. I know you by 1,000 names, you deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed at what you've done, and I am lost in wonder at all you do. I know you by 1,000 names, and I'll sing them back to you. Yeah, I'll sing them all back. Your love is boundless, beyond what I can dream. Your grace is patient, 'cause you're never giving up on me. I call you bondage breaker, 'cause you're hanging up the prison keys. My soul was made, yeah, to be free. Oh, I know you by 1,000 names. You deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed at what you've done, and I am lost in wonder at all you do. I know you by 1,000 names, and I'll sing them back. Sing them back to you. Oh, sing them back to you, Lord. Our rock of ages, you're the great I am. You are King forever, the beginning and the end. Our Lord and servant, you're the Son of Man. You're the Lion of Judah, you're the risen Lamb. You are second Adam, to lead us home. You are Yahweh's glory now, revealed in flesh and bone. You are ocean parter, you will make a way. You are death defeater, you have risen from the grave. given me so many ways to be amazed. I'm amazed, I'm amazed. I know you by 1,000 a day. You deserve every single one. You've given me a million ways to be amazed at what you've done. And I am lost in wonder at all you do. I know you by 1,000 days, so I'll sing them back, sing them back, sing them all right back to you. I'll sing them all back. I'll sing them all back. Oh, I'll sing them all back 'cause you're worthy. I'll sing them all back 'cause you're worthy. I'll sing them all back 'cause you're worthy. You're holy. You are Jesus. Oh, in the Bible we read count after count of how God met people exactly where they were. None have gotta take, whose love endures through generations. I know that you will keep your covenant. I'm calling on the God of Moses, the one who opened up the ocean. I need you now to do the same thing for me. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness, on your faithfulness. I'm calling on the God of men, whose favor rests upon the Lord. I know with you all things are possible. I'm calling on the God of David, who made a shepherd boy courageous. I may not face Goliath, but I've got my own giants. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness, on your faithfulness. You heard your children then, you hear your children now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You answered prayers back then, and you will answer now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You were providing then. You are providing now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You moved in power then. God move in power now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You were a healer then. You are a healer now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You were a savior then. You are a savior now. You are the same God.
Our God is unchanging. He's the same God, and He's never failed us. And we know in His promises and in His word that He will never fail us. This is the God that we serve, the God deserving of all our praise. And His love upholds us through every trial. He's never let us down. So let's put our faith in Him as we continue to sing today. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever bring. We live for You. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for You. Holy, there is no one like You. There is none beside You. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who You are and fill me with Your heart and lead me in Your love to those around me. Sing worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for You. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for You. Oh, we live for You. Holy, there is no one like You. There is none beside You. Open up my eyes declare this. Oh, I won't bow to idols. I'll stand strong and worship you. And if it puts me in the fire, I'll rejoice 'cause you're there too. I won't be formed by feelings. I'll hold fast to what is true. 'Cause if the cross brings transformation, then I'll be crucified with you. 'Cause death is just a doorway into resurrection life. And if I join you in the suffering, then I'll join you when you rise. And when you return in glory with all the angels and the saints, my heart will still be singing. Oh, my song will be the same. Oh, Christ be magnified. Let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified. Oh, let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me.
Oh, Jesus, we want you to be magnified in our lives. We want you to be the center of our vision, the biggest thing in our view. We want everything else to take second place and third and fourth. We thank you for the things that you want to do in our lives today. Even as we worship you, we sense your presence here with us. We sense it in our hearts and in our lives. We open our hearts to you for what you have for us today. We know that you have something that you want to speak into each one of our hearts, and we don't want to miss that, so we open our lives to you. We're so grateful for your presence here with us. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for joining in these moments with us. You can have a seat.
Hi everyone, my name is John and I'm the new online campus pastor here at the church, and I want to welcome you to Hope City. We're really glad that you've joined us for church today. We know that every week there are people who are newer to the church or even joining us for the first time, and if that's you, we want to let you know that we're glad that you're here. If you have questions about Hope City or just want to say hi, the best way to do that is to head into our guest lounge after the service, and if you're watching online, you can go to hopecity.ca/new. We'd love to meet you, and we want to help you take your next step at our church. We want to be a church who loves Jesus and shows his love to others. This August, there's another great opportunity for us to be for Edmonton as a church. Our Back to School Bash is an event we do each year that helps families in our community who might need a little bit of extra help heading into the school year. Last year, we had over 120 families at our Millwoods and Kingsway locations, and next month, we're going to be doing it again at all 3 of our campuses. So there are 2 ways that you can help be for Edmonton. First, we want to provide school supplies for these kids, so you can donate funds towards the purchasing of those. And the second would be to volunteer at either the Kingsway, Millwoods, or Terwillegar locations. For more details, you can make sure to go to hopecity.ca/weekly. Now, we get to do things like this because of generous people like you who give faithfully of their finances. Hope City, when you give, it opens up opportunities to do things that multiplies and spreads God's message of hope and love through our city, our country, and around the world. When you give, it makes a difference. To find out how you can give, go to hopecity.ca/give. All right, that's it from me. Now, Pastor Thomas, our youth department lead, will be continuing our series, More Than Fairy Tales.
Did God really say you must not eat from any Well, good morning, Hope City. It's great seeing you here today. Some of you look a little bit more tanned. Some of you look a little more red. Either way, whether you've been sun-kissed or burnt, it is good seeing you. If you're watching online, it's great having you too. Well, a few weeks back, we started a summer series titled More Than Fairy Tales. Now, where we're looking at, for many of you, we're visiting several epic stories from the Old Testament that are true, like Samson. We look at the story of the Exodus. We look at Jonah, who was swallowed by a whale. Now, these are grand stories, but they're real stories. And our purpose of doing this and going here this summer is to remind our church that these stories, like I said, although grand, are real stories. And to remind us that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And what he did back then, he is still doing today. These are stories that build our faith. These are stories that build our life. And the book and the story that we're going through this morning, called Ruth, is no exception. It's found right after the book of Judges in the Old Testament. And the book is actually kind of, to be honest, a bit like a rural love story. It reminds me of one of those Amish romance novels you find at Goodwill. Honestly, broadly, this story is about a young widow with little options who meets this solid, kind man named Boaz. They fall in love, and he rescues her and her widowed mother-in-law, Naomi. And this small 4-chapter book is packed, packed with spiritual and practical truths that I think if you read it in different seasons of your life, you're going to find that God is speaking to you in each one of those different seasons. There are multiple directions I could have gone with this small little 4-chapter book. Some of the titles I could have chosen for it was What to Do When You Feel Stuck in Your Faith or in Your Life, and What Do You Do Next? Or When You Can't Hear God, What Now? Or I'm bitter and angry at God, does he even care? And for you single ladies, girl, get your Boaz, right? There's so much packed into this little book. And ultimately, this is a story of hope. In the end, this story has a hero. It has a redeemer who is a foreshadow of Jesus as our hope and redeemer. But what I love about this book is that this hero doesn't intervene in some miraculous way. Hope comes through an outsider who simply made a commitment, did the next right thing, and who sought out her Redeemer. And to be someone, like I said, I could have gone many different directions with this book. But as I read and reread this story the last couple of weeks, one angle stuck out like a front cover of those Amish romance novels, and it's this. How do we continue to faithfully follow Jesus in a culture and environment that pressures us to do the exact opposite? Like to be someone who commits to Jesus, who wants to align one's life to the Bible and choosing often the harder option because we want to pick up our cross and we want to follow Jesus, it seems to be getting harder and harder to do. And the pressure to conform or to ease up on our convictions or maybe ease up on our commitments to the church, to God's church, it's strong. I mean, think about what's going on in culture right now. Think what's going on for just the Christian world. Many of our ethics, many of our values and truths, they no longer align to culture. In fact, now a lot of them are maligned by culture. There's a growing trend of Christians who are leaving the church, compromising their faith. Many are leaving their faith entirely or even adding to their faith so that it's not just God they're worshiping, but they're worshiping other things as well, adding to that truth. And honestly, sometimes there are Christians doing really terrible things and creating a bad reputation entirely for believers. And in this current dilemma, the book of Ruth is hope for us. Now, let me give you some context of what's happening here. So Ruth comes after the book Judges. And the last chapter of Judges describes the tragic moral and spiritual state of the Jewish people during this area. In Judges chapter 21, verse 25, it says this: In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. Does that sound familiar? Israel, God's people, they had actually lost track of the law at this point. They started worshiping other gods alongside their God, and they slipped into a bit of moral depravity at this point. On top of this, Ruth was an outsider. She was a Moabite. And the Moabite people at this point, they were currently ruling over and oppressing Israel. As we'll see later, it would have been easier for her to literally just go back to her people, kind of adopt her gods again, and kind of let go of the God of her late husband and of her mother-in-law, Naomi. But if that wasn't enough, Naomi, who was an Israelite and who for all her life obeyed God, had become increasingly bitter towards God because of all her loss. In Ruth chapter 1, verse 1 to 5, it's one of the saddest intros of a book you can read. It gives us a bit of context of what's happening in Naomi's life, what's happening in Israel, and what's happening for Ruth. And it reads like this. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. It goes on to tell us that Naomi was so bitter and angry towards God that when she went back to her hometown, Bethlehem, because a famine had hit Moab, and she had heard, like we read, that the famine was kind of over in Israel. And when she was going back to Bethlehem, everyone was so excited. Is this Naomi? And she says, "Don't call me Naomi." This is what it reads. "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty had made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So here you have Ruth's faith was up against her own past, the tragic spiritual and moral state of God's people, and the broken, fragile faith of Naomi, literally the only person she knew in this new land. The book of Ruth reminds us, though, that even in evil times, a godly life is totally possible. And how? How do you not buckle under the weight of that pressure? I'm going to go into each chapter of this book. Like I said, there's only 4, and I'm going to kind of condense it into something we can learn from Ruth that can lead us to being people who not only thrive in our culture, but I think are people also of hope, who are waiting for a Redeemer. And we're going to see 3 actions that we can take, and then in the 4th, we're going to see the impact of those decisions and how it can have an impact in your life where you are, right where you are. In the spirit of this book, I'm going to title every point from actual Amish romance novels. I'm kidding, I won't do that, but I thought that would be pretty fun to do, actually. But I thought, maybe a little too far, Thomas. So chapter 1, if I was going to call this chapter 1 would be A Choice is Made. And this is what we see here in the first chapter of Ruth. It's amazing, though, how life-changing and transforming choices can be. Like, I think, and I think we understand that our lives are basically made up of the choices or the decisions and the commitments that we make. I think 19 years ago, just about 19 years ago, I was 19, I was in Ottawa, and I decided to move out to Alberta for school. And here I am 19 years later. I left single with nothing. I came here with school. I met a wife. I've got 3 kids, working here now. And for some reason, I don't know how, but I have a truck and a trailer. This was not my life in Ottawa. But that little decision impacted many other decisions I made. And we know that happens. The commitments we make, the decisions, the choices we make form our lives. But it's funny how easy it is with some of our commitments, with some of our decisions, that we can drift over time from them, especially when pressure is applied. For example, for years, I told Catherine, my wife, that I definitely did not want a dog. It was a hard no for her pleas of furry bliss. I just didn't want one. I like dogs, but I like dogs more when they're not in my house. For years, though, or over the years, my wife collected 3 allies, also known as her children. And the pressures built, all right? But there was no way I was changing my mind. Listen, I made a choice. I know this was right for a family not to do this. I knew financially it doesn't make sense. And I knew that my kids would definitely not pick up after the dog, no matter how many, literally, slideshows they showed me. I want to introduce you to Toby. Our dog should be coming up on the screen right there. We got this dog 2 years ago. They won, and I totally buckled under the pressure. Listen, we grow, we learn. And for some of us, we get worn down, to be honest. And our choices, they do change. And honestly, that's pretty normal. There are some decisions that need to be revisited. Your haircut, in the 90s doesn't work now, right? 80s, for some reason, they work, but not 90s yet. But there are some decisions that, despite pressure, we know should never change. You think about your commitment to your spouse. You think about maybe your commitment to school. You think about your commitment to work. Some of those things really shouldn't change. In fact, it's our commitment to these choices that actually shape who we are, what we do, and who we become. And so it's so important that we make sure we make those kinds of decisions and what those decisions actually are. And chapter 1 introduces us to Ruth and Naomi, and we hear about the trials that they faced. There was famine, there was a loss of these three, and then you have Orpah and Ruth. The famine had ended in her homeland, so she set out for Bethlehem, and it's here where Ruth makes a choice that absolutely shapes her, that shapes her future, and leads to redemption for her mother-in-law, and for the people of Israel. Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons? Who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I'm too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." Now, this made sense. Naomi was too old to get remarried and have sons. She was always going to be at the mercy of other people. She was an old widow. Her daughter-in-laws were young. They were young enough to return to their homeland Moab, to maybe find another husband and have a family. Orpah chose to return to her people, and it was practically the best decision that she could make, when we don't actually hear about her again. But Ruth, on the other hand, she actually decided to stay. Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you." Listen to what she says. "Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." And I want to point something out in this amazing statement. When Ruth says that Naomi's God will be her God, in the language here, Ruth is actually using the divine name Yahweh, illustrating that she is indeed viewing Naomi's God as her God. Why is that important, though? Why do I point this out? Well, think about it. Everything seems to be against God's people at this point. God's people are currently being oppressed. They're succumbing to pressure and actively pursuing other gods. Her Israelite family has all experienced loss that is economically and relationally devastating. Naomi's faith has grown cold. Ruth could have easily and rightly went back to Moab and given up her identity as part of God's people. Think about everything your faith is actually up against today. Yet, in the midst of all of that, Ruth made the choice to follow God and his people. And not just a choice, it was a determined stand about it. As we'll see in chapter 2 and chapter 3, her commitment to God and his people shaped her life and eventually led to redemption. Now, if Ruth hadn't have made this commitment and this decision, this book wouldn't exist, and spoiler alert, King David wouldn't exist. And over the years, whether it's been in friends' homes growing up or some of the houses I've been invited to as a pastor, one of the things I actually always look for are those really nice statements that are well framed. You walk into a bathroom and there's this quirky saying of reminding you how to use the bathroom properly and wash your hands properly. And you know right then not to shake their kids' hands because those are there for a reason, right? My favorite one is this scripture verse that I find in some people's homes. It says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And this is exactly what Ruth decided and committed to in the midst of heavy pressure to do the exact opposite. This is what you and I need to engrave in our hearts and our minds and model and to speak to our kids and in our coming and our going. As for me, I will serve the Lord. Because if we want a faith that endure, a commitment like Ruth's has to be made. This isn't about ignoring difficulties. It's not about ignoring certain things that are happening. It's not about not asking serious questions about our faith and about God and our history. This isn't about ignoring wrongs. It is about making a choice in the midst of all that to wrestle it out with God, to understand that God is your hope, that God is our hope, that God is our culture's hope in all of this. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You and I won't be able to withstand the pressure or have hope without making this determined choice. As for me, I will serve the Lord. As for me and my house, I will serve the Lord. It's choices like this that determine our next steps. And we see this in Ruth's life. In fact, in chapter 2, this is what we read. 2 verses 1 to 3. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. Now, according to the law and the Gospels, that God gave his people, orphans and widows were to be cared for, and they could, along with foreigners in need, glean behind the harvesters for leftover grain. So what you have is Ruth and Naomi went back to Bethlehem. Naomi was a widow, so was Ruth. And so the next right thing for Ruth to have done would to be doing that, care for the widow and glean behind the harvesters. You read in Exodus chapter 22, it says, "Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do, then they cry out to me. I will certainly hear their cry." In Leviticus 19, it says, "When you reap the harvest for your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God." These are laws in the Old Testament. These are things that Ruth would have known. So her commitment to God leads her to do the next right thing, which was to care for the widow, Naomi, and to glean grain according to the customs of the law. Now, is this exciting? No. It is not exciting. But was it the next godly, right thing for her to do? Yes, it was. And Ruth kept doing that. Now, sometimes the best and only thing we can do in a culture that's bent against following Jesus, against biblical truth, or while under pressure to compromise your convictions, is literally just to do the right next thing that God is asking you to do. For Ruth, her choice to follow God meant she needed to do what she did, but for you, it may look different. Maybe it's to come out of your spiritual complacency. Maybe it's to return to church. Maybe it's having integrity at work or being a person of peace where you are. Maybe it's honoring God with your relationship with your boyfriend or your girlfriend. Maybe it's committing again to your wife or to your spouse. Maybe it's re-examining your relationship with social media. Maybe it's recommitting to discipling your kids or discipling someone that you know. I don't know what the next right thing is for you, but what is God asking you to do? Because sometimes that's all we can do. And I know it. The objection is, but Thomas, it just doesn't sound big enough. How is this going to have any effect on the spiritual climate of our culture, me just doing that thing? How's that going to change anything? And this is why I love this story. This is why I think it's so important for us to read it in our current spiritual climate. Ruth wasn't Israel's hope. Ruth is not the redeemer in this story. You are not our culture's hope. I am not our culture's redeemer. It's too big of a job, and it's way out of your calling. Let me remind you what Jesus said our calling is. He says, to be the salt and light of the world. Salt preserve and light points. We do this by living in a way that preserves God's better way of living and which points others to him. That's what it means to live a godly life. It's to simply be salt and light. And this is what Ruth was doing. But I love what happened here. See, Ruth living a godly life, this is what it led to. The first thing is this, is that it challenged people's perception of Ruth and God's people. So when Boaz had noticed Ruth, he asked, who is this woman? And some of his workers replied this way. She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She came into the field, and I want you to listen to how they word this. And has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. They didn't expect a Moabite to work so hard. For her mother-in-law, but also just to work hard like that. It continues. Boaz replied in verses 11 to 12, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with the people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you've done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So Ruth is mentioned in this book as a Moabite a number of times. They had among the Israelites a bad reputation, considering the history between the two. But her hard work didn't go unnoticed, even by those who held her in contempt. Now, people have an idea about Christians, who we are, what we believe, what we're against, all those things. And it's impossible for us to redeem all of that. But what you and I can do is live a godly life that showcases God's goodness. We know God is good. So we should live in a way that shows that God is good. And you need to be asking yourself, what kind of reputation am I leaving behind? Christianity, or the people beside you, Naomi, the only person Ruth knew was Naomi, and she was bitter towards God. And she did not live according to Naomi. She lived according to who God was. And she showcased that. What kind of reputation are you leaving? Don't worry about anyone else's but yours. And as she lived a godly life, the reputation of Ruth changed. The second thing we see is that her godly living attracted like-hearted people to her. So Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the women. I've told the men not to lay a hand on you, and whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. So now for Ruth, her reputation commitment to her next right thing led to meeting Boaz, who, as another spoiler, was her redeemer, became her husband, and redeemed the entire family. Now, I'm sure if Ruth didn't have a great reputation and wasn't obedient, she wouldn't have attracted a good, godly man like Boaz. Just wouldn't have been in those situations. Living a godly life is difficult, and it's often lonely in our culture. But Ruth teaches us something here. When we choose to honor God with our life and decisions, you actually tend to attract other people who are attempting to do the same. Cling to those people. But the only way you find those people is to live a godly life. If you want to compromise, make those your people. If you want to live a godly life, stick with those who are also choosing to live a godly life. The third thing is her godly living strengthened the faith of her mother-in-law. Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz, she said. The Lord bless him, Naomi said, and to her daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. This is the same lady who's like bitter towards the Lord. But as Ruth was honoring God, it ignited again the faith of Naomi. When we live faithfully in the midst of a culture challenging our faithlessness, our lives and God's blessing because of it can act as an example and reignite faith and hope in other believers who've grown tired, who've grown weary, who've grown stagnant. What I love about it is that God used these small acts of obedience that Ruth did, and he did big things because of it. Ruth made a choice. Then she did the next right thing. And you can already see that there's so much packed into this book. But as we moved into the third chapter, we see that she didn't stop there. She also pursued her Redeemer. In Luke chapter 3, verses 1 to 6, it says, "One day Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, 'My daughter, I must find a home for you, where you be well provided for.' Now Boaz, with whom women you've had worked, is a relative of yours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Now go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. 'I will do whatever you say,' Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do." I know at this point, like, whoa. She did what? What kind of romance novel is this? Yeah, it sounds a bit spicy here. But before you go too far in your excitement or disapproval, here's something you need to know. This is not a sexual advance. Nowhere in this chapter, in this book, do you see that. In fact, the next chapter tells us about kind of the first night between the two, okay? What this chapter does tell us, though, is that Ruth consistently sought out her Redeemer. In fact, the word Redeemer is mentioned over 20 times in this small 4-chapter book. Why? Because it reminds us we are not the Redeemer. God is. And so it's an invitation for us to do the same. What I mean by that is an invitation for us to get into God's presence and to be speaking with him as often as we can. And this is where maybe I lose some of you, because all of this sounds way too simple. But prayer is the most advanced practice a Christian can experience that has only benefited from people who actually do it. Prayer is not just something Christians do to get exactly what we want. It's the way in which our wills, our perspectives, and our characters are shaped. It brings peace, a sense of knowing he is with you. When I don't pray, I get anxious. There's a lot to be anxious about. How are we going to reach culture? How are we going to do this? Among all the other things you're anxious about. But if we don't pray, we allow that to rule the day and our attention and our focus. That's what makes us drift from our commitment to be a person who follows God. In Psalm 23, verse 4 to 5, it says, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Do you know that he is with you? And some of us only speak one language, and that's complaint. But those who pray learn a new language, and they mean it. It sounds something like, "It'll be okay. He is with me. He is for me. He will do something in and through me." Pray for courage. Pray that your kids will have courage. Pray for the Lord to come. Pray for wisdom. Pray for God's intervention. Pray for change. Pray for strength. Pray. Seek your Redeemer. This is what Ruth did, and this is what led to God doing incredible things in and through Ruth. She made a commitment to God and his people. She lived a godly life by doing the next right thing and sought out her Redeemer. And God's used all this small pieces of obedience and did something incredible. We read in chapter 4. "So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. When he made love to her," see, I told you, "the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, 'Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth.' Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, 'Naomi has a son,' and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David." Despite Ruth being an outsider, she became one of only 5 women mentioned in Jesus' genealogies. Her and Boaz's son, Obed, was the father of Jesse, who was the father of Israel's greatest king, David. And it's under King David that led to Israel having a prosperous time spiritually and nationally. Naomi's faith was restored. This book that was based on her life was used as an example to instill hope for the nation of Israel as they continually found themselves in exile. And here we are, thousands of years later, still learning from it. Listen, your faith may be up against your own past. It's up against the tragic spiritual and moral state of our culture and the broken, fragile faith of many believers. Some of these that you actually know personally. But the book of Ruth reminds us that even in evil times, a godly life is possible. How? Like Ruth. You make a choice. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Secondly, you do the next right thing. That's how you build a godly life. God, what are you asking me to do? And you do it faithfully. And thirdly, you consistently seek out the presence of your Redeemer. You pray. You hope. Keep going. Keep choosing Jesus. Keep doing the next right thing. And keep seeking our hope, our Redeemer. Hope City, keep going. Let me pray for you. Jesus, we can't do it without you. That's the story, is that we are not the Redeemer, you are the Redeemer. But in a society and a culture where we feel like we're up against a lot, when we go to our workplaces and everything seems so unnatural to us, wondering what do we do, how do we navigate it, God, I'm thankful that you don't call us to be their hope. You call us to be the ones who lead them to hope. May we be the kind of people who leave our homes and think today, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Be the people who do the next right thing in our workplaces, in our schools, as we go about culture. May we be the people who just are obedient to the next right thing you're calling us to. May we be the people who seek out the presence of our Redeemer. Lord, you are our culture's hope. Or may we be the kind of people who point our culture to that hope. Give us grace, grant us strength, and Holy Spirit, would you lead us? Amen. Maybe some of you are watching or here and you're wondering about next steps with Jesus. We do have next steps. Either the QR code in front of you or it comes on the screen, or you can go to hopecity.ca/life if you want more information on what it looks like to walk with Jesus. Hope City, we're so thankful for you. We pray for you. Thanks for making this a priority in your summer, Sunday. And if you want or need prayer, there'll be some pastors up here on this side who would love to pray with you. Have a wonderful week, Hope City. See you next week.
I'm so glad that you joined us for church. But before you go, I want you to ask yourself, what does this all mean for my life? What does my next step look like? I believe God loves you, cares for you, and wants to reveal himself to you. If you would like to talk to a pastor or just get more info on what your next step could look like here at the church, check out hopecity.ca/online. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next week.